So we'll see what happens.
I'm starting to record it now.
Good idea. All right.
Moving on. I just downloaded the book off the Kindle while we were sitting there. So I'm going to read it tonight. Would you want to come on the show? I'm doing a whole set. Okay, awesome. Because I got a second
I love it.
and I was like, there's nothing better than Bruce Stew and beer.
So here, let me give you right here.
Oh yeah.
I think I just had my card messed up.
Okay, yeah. So that we can share. Together then you can share the thing.
Yeah, and I'll reach out to you, give you a couple dates or something.
Yeah. When do you normally report?
Wednesdays from 9 to 11.
Okay. I mean,
Oh, we can always.
No, it's okay. Wednesday, I'm trying to think what Wednesdays are. That's fine. I don't take this to work. I just go grab a copy.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, that's easy enough. Awesome. It'll be a lot of fun. You're here locally, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Absolutely. Sweet. Do you do it? So you do it as a regular podcast?
Yes. And we're up
Oh, yeah. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll do it. So, yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, we can do that too. You know,
I'm in 10 feet. Okay.
So I get some beer and drink some. We got a show that's so normally, and that's how he pays us to come and do the show. Beer and some.
Yeah, exactly right. That's if it isn't factored, I'm not happy. That's how I do it. Sure. This is you. Yeah, did I give you one of mine? You took one. Okay, great. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hate everything scattered out like that. I didn't bring my Kindle. All right, what's in here next?
Blocking like a time lord. Not a consignment.
Amy, honey. Not me. I
Just push the red button. The fact you can push it down if you want. I've noticed my whole life. This is Dutch shops, so all the time. MC from 90s MTV. Thanks,
So, like with beer, I know. I was watching. So, I want to find out.
Steve, don't let it run away, brother. Real quick.
Something else that's technically related.
What's cool is it has a switch on the on-air side.
Oh, do you watch
Do you mind if I zoom in on you sometimes? I'm not going to be like super crazy with the zoom in.
We do a live stream.
Someone's ready. Someone's ready.
I think I played the Ballad of Jane last year for you.
There's like a 3D printed TARDIS out there, like on Instagram, and I was like, so what do I do? What do I? What do I turn on screen? Make the screen go good.
Isn't there a KVM switch back there?
I don't know.
Kind of behind your laptop? The box? Cable's plugged in?
Yes. I guess. I don't want to just start pushing buttons.
Because are you plugged in?
I plugged in this blue one that looks like it belongs.
I saw something. There it is.
Yeah. You see that?
I almost wore that shirt. Just saying.
What's that?
I almost wore that shirt.
Just to embarrass me?
Please just turn it off that light.
They have it?
Yeah.
Get a little darker.
It's another set over here.
Darker still, oh yeah.
But if you turn that one off, the video will probably not be able to get very good light.
Yeah, we'll turn up the gain. Lower the shutter speed. Is that okay? Are you guys okay with that?
It's very dark on camera.
I spent a lot of time on these slides.
We actually went to supposed to do
Oh, it's not to me. I just get this message to call me. I don't know who you are.
But if you can see, I can see it.
It's a great teaser that I'm in.
With this, I can actually see it.
Yeah, that he offered me a job. Social media
You can just edit the slides later in the post.
It's a super cute logo. I just posted one here, and I think like, I kind of was like, great.
So I don't
We had an awesome team. We had Sally and me and you. And we actually made basically we wanted to do multi-install WordPress for pet shelters. So we had to fix a easy website with the ability to post pictures and galleries and stuff of animals. We did a lot of work. 16 hours per week. No one rabbits.
You guys feel like getting started?
Yeah, do it.
This sick of the chit chat. Ready to get going? Okay, well, welcome. There it is. It's ready to play. All right, sweet. So, question: who in here watches Doctor Who? Oh, good. This is gonna make this a lot more enjoyable. Keep them up. Keep them up. Keep them up. Keep them up. All right. So, what's your name?
Name?
Yeah.
My Anita.
Anita, who's your doctor?
I think it was funny. I can't think of your name. I know, I'm like, that's really funny. I think, and this is going to show that I am a fan, but I don't remember the names. It's old school. I think is it Tom Baker? The old curly hair.
Scarf?
Yes, Scarf.
Scarfy, I call him.
Yes. What's his name? Scarfy?
I don't think it's Scarfy. All right, who else?
9. I'm definitely 9 is my doctor.
Okay. Awesome. Anybody else? Doctor Who's kind of like a boy band. Everybody has like, oh, I'm a Justin or a Jordan. Anybody else?
10 and 11.
10 and 11?
Yeah.
Both of them?
Yeah.
They say that you never forget your first doctor, right? I'm a timid guy. So when I put this thing together, I'm really glad a lot of people watch Doctor Who, so I don't have to spend a lot of exposition like explaining who he is and what he does. But I sent out kind of a survey and asked people to, one of the questions was to describe the show to someone who's never seen it in one sentence. And one answer stood out. I love this one. Batman and Willy Wonka have a love child who travels through space and time in a phone. Probably the best description I've ever heard of the show. I think we can all agree. So just to make sure, Doctor Who is he is an alien. Nobody knows his actual name. He just goes by the Doctor. He goes through space and time using what is known as the TARDIS. And that's all you need to know. Like, it's pretty much a science fiction show. The nice thing is that you can go through space and time. And it's a TV show, which lets you do pretty much any science fiction short story you want to tell. Gives you the ability to do that. So, Batman and Willy Wonka's love child. So I know this is an unconference and the law of 2 feet, so you guys are free to get up and leave if you get sick of Doctor Who, but I'm going to make you a deal. I have recently discovered that each of the recent Doctor's companions may or may not represent somebody in classic literature or fairy tales. Has anybody heard of this? Perfect. So at the end, if you guys stick around, at the end of the presentation, I'm going to share what these are. They're pretty interesting, but I'll give you the first one for free, so you can tell what I'm talking about. We'll see if you can guess which literary or fairy tale character Rose represents.
Little Red Riding Hood.
Okay. So Rose is supposedly supposed to personify Little Red Riding Hood, or at least the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And this projector's terrible. She's wearing like a bright red jacket. The slides are really cool, I promise. So that said, I'll go over the rest of them later. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff. If you're a Doctor Who conspiracy theory guy or lady, and I'm a little nervous. I don't know why, because I'm talking about Doctor Who. But, okay. So, let's talk about Doctor Who and kind of the idea of what I wanted to talk about today. Basically, I wanted to talk about how can this TV show be forever old? In fact, what's coming up in like a week? The 50th anniversary. Is there any other show that's been on TV for 50 years? Or is this like the best one? Or like the longest? It's got to be in the running for the longest show. And despite that, Doctor Who is so hot right now. Okay? And so I was kind of thinking about it. Well, and last year at TechPHX I talked about Firefly and how Firefly's fan base may be smaller than, say, Star Trek's or Star Wars, but it continually beats out in online surveys and polls and things like that. It always wins anytime you match things up. And so fandom's always kind of fascinated me, and I kind of explored that last year. Like, why are Firefly fans so engaged? Why are they so passionate? And how to kind of apply that to your blog or your podcast to turn your followers into brown coats. And this year I kind of want to talk about why is Doctor Who still so hot after all these years. So it is a pretty popular show, as you might know, if you're online. It's kind of all over the internets. And it's kind of dominated Tumblr for a while, I hear. And especially with the 50th anniversary coming up, it's pretty much all I see in in a lot of my feeds. But the fan base for Doctor Who may not be as rabid, maybe, as Firefly, but it's pretty devoted. In fact, I came across this. I don't know if you've heard of the PBS Idea channel, but this guy has a legit 7 minutes and 40 seconds YouTube video that outlines how Doctor Who could be technically considered a religion. Like the fandom could be considered, it literally shares the same attributes, the same cosmology, the same frame of the universe that other religions have. The symbolism, the hero, and all that stuff. It was pretty fascinating. You should Google it later and watch it. It was pretty fun. So the conclusion I came to was, okay, well, what keeps something interesting? What keeps something hot for 50 years, but people still want to talk about it, and how could we apply that? And I kind of, it's in the title of the presentation, so it's not really a spoiler, but I broke it down to 3 things. Doctor Who has stayed fresh, it's stayed ridiculous, and it's also stayed meaningful. So hopefully we can get through those 3 things. I wish I had like a remote or something, but I'm happy to pace anyway. So let's talk about the first item, how something has stayed fresh. And this shouldn't surprise you that I use it. So I just kind of like open it up to questions. Why do you think keeping people interested, why do you think keeping your blog or your podcast fresh is important? And I will be silent until someone shares a thought.
Because they can switch up the actors all the time.
What's that?
Because they can switch up the actors all the time, so it stays fresh.
On Doctor Who?
Yeah.
Yeah, they switch out the actors, right? It's like a huge violation of almost any advice you're ever going to get to run a major TV show. Don't kill off the main character after a season. Don't kill him off after 2 seasons. So that's one of the ways Doctor Who has stayed fresh. So how about like your blog? Why is it important to stay fresh?
Why would people come back if it's the same old stuff all the time?
Okay. Keeps people coming back, definitely.
You become representative of an authority figure in whatever field you're writing in, I guess, if you want more technical answer.
Yeah, totally. Any other thoughts on why staying fresh is important? So I did want to talk a little bit about how Doctor Who does it. So as part of that survey that I sent out, one of the questions I asked was, why do you think Doctor Who is still popular after all these years? And this is kind of a word cloud, I wish you could see, of all of the words that were in all these answers that I got. I got 42 answers to this survey, which kind of shows you the fan base right there. And so a few things stood out to me. Besides some of the obvious things that are going to show up, like Doctor and Companions, Show, and Time, I noticed that the word different stood out a ton. So did changing and new. And there was something else that kind of stood out to me. But I think that it's kind of telling that because of the changing of the actors, because of the changing of the head writers, because of kind of like the reboot back in 2005, it has really sort of propelled it forward. So the first thing I want to talk about, one of number 10, my favorite, his favorite lines is to be brave and try new things. So this is under keeping it fresh, yeah. So Doctor Who, one of the major themes of the show is literally regeneration. So if you don't know, Doctor Who doesn't actually die. If he is killed, then his body regenerates and he becomes a new actor, basically. It's a constant thing in the show. It's kind of part of his character. In fact, it's such a big part of the show that his sort of mortal enemies, the Daleks, have a catchphrase that is actually the opposite of this theme. They love to shout exterminate at people, like they just want to end things, and they'll just shout exterminate whatever they want. But Doctor Who is like the opposite, right? He's constantly regenerating. And to give you an example of how powerful and important this can be, one of the oldest and biggest organizations in the world is breathing new life into the perception of it, breathing new life into people's belief in it, with sort of a new, I hate to use the word actor, but like comparing it to Doctor Who to a kind of a new figurehead. And it's been really fascinating for me to sit back and watch on social media the reaction that the world has had to this new pope. He's like the difference between Doctor Who 9 and Doctor Who 10. It's just been really kind of interesting to sit back and watch the way that social media's reacted to him, how people of different political spectrums have reacted to him, and it's kind of like breathing new life into something that could easily be considered extremely old, extremely stale, run by the same old fogies that have been running it for thousands of years. And here we have this kind of new, breathing new life into it, and that is very important. If we don't keep our online personalities, if we don't keep our podcast or our blog fresh, people will, as you mentioned earlier, they will grow stale, and you'll kind of become marginalized. Like, if you've said the same thing over and over and over again, people are going to be looking for something new. So, part of it is being brave, because what do people really resist more than just about anything in the world? Yeah, people resist change. So, Dr. Who gives us some advice. He says, everything's got to end sometime, otherwise nothing would ever get started. So next time you're worried about that, maybe think of this phrase. Everything does need to end. And I know in my blog, I have given up something near and dear to my heart to try something new. I am obsessed with bullet points. And like every one of my blog posts was pretty much 100 bullet points. And I was so proud of those. They'd be very unique. And I've given them up lately. I had to be brave. And instead of using block quotes in a lot of the things that I want, and it looks so much better. And people have really reacted better to it. And it's been an overall good experience. And I kind of had to let that go. So I want to give another Doctor Who example, because that's what this is all about. Who knows who these lovely chaps are? Cybermen. All right. So the Cybermen in Doctor Who universe are pretty much the Borg, but a little goofier. And the Cybermen had a problem. The Cybermen had so much potential to be one of Doctor Who's scariest monsters. And over the last few seasons, they've had a pretty bad reputation. So, if you don't know, the Cybermen like to take people's brains out and put them in a Cyberman body and upgrade them. And in sort of the rebooted Doctor Who series, they just sort of like stomp around town. And whenever they're invading, and they're very loud and very slow, and people flee from them in a pace that is probably unnecessary because they're so slow and very unintimidating. And it was just kind of a big complaint that such a cherished part of Doctor Who was ending up so lame. And so they, instead of like just sort of sticking with it and working through it, they decided to be brave. They decided to try something new. And does anybody maybe know what episode I might be talking about? So they actually, Austin looks like he does. No? Yes? It's called Nightmare in Silver. Yep. So the writers of Doctor Who said, all right, Neil Gaiman, right? Neil Gaiman, you write us a Cybermen episode. And it was hugely successful, and they almost changed, they just completely changed everything about the Cybermen. They kept kind of those core important things, and they changed everything else. Instead of being loud and obnoxious and like stomping around town like soldiers, they became very fast, very scary, and super smart. And they became like, they took the Doctor head on in his mind, I think, in that episode, and really challenged him. It was like almost an even match. And suddenly there was like new life in the Cybermen, and people liked the Cybermen again. So, great example of being brave. Another example I love from Doctor Who is this episode. This is probably the most popular episode of Doctor Who of all time, and rightly so. But this was a really cool example of experimenting and trying something new, because this is a show about Doctor Who, and how much is Doctor Who in this episode? This is about it, right? You see, he sort of pops up once with this, some of the most popular catchphrases to ever come from the show on this DVD. But they completely took him out. Another example, I love examples. This is from a different show. I don't know if anybody recognizes these fellas. This is from an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer called Hush. Not to troll my own presentation, but I like Buffy a lot, maybe even a little more than Doctor Who. I love the show. Yeah. So, and this is one of the best episodes. In fact, I remember telling my wife after I watched Blink, I hadn't felt that way watching an episode since I watched Hush. And so the thing behind the episode of Hush, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was Joss Whedon read a review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joss Whedon would write the show, it's his show. And he read a review that said, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is an amazing show. It's so good, because Joss Whedon writes amazing dialogue. It's just so good, you have to watch the show. So what did Joss Whedon decide to do with this episode of Hush? He has a monster come into the episode that takes away everybody's ability to speak or make a sound. And pretty much, I think it's about 95% of the episode has no dialogue. It's almost completely silent episode. And it ended up being a huge success. It was like Anyway, I think it's one of the greatest episodes of television of all time. You gotta go watch it. So how does Lightning Octopus do this? Well, I'm lucky. I write about nerdy events going on in the Valley, and so I really don't run out of a lot of things to say. I kind of get fresh new things every week to talk about. But I'm kind of curious, like what you guys write about, and maybe how what changes you might be willing to dive into. Any thoughts? Because I will just sit and ramble when I'm nervous. What do you guys write about? What do you guys blog about?
Whatever pisses me off that week.
Okay. What's pissed you off lately, Ruth?
My publisher.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there anything that you could maybe try something new or experiment with in your blog?
That's why I'm here. I'm trying to figure out,
Okay.
What can I do differently? Like part of I think what I love about your blog is that you're a great information source, and I sit around and talk about myself.
Right.
So I think for the shift for me, I'd be a little less self-centered. As much as I enjoy that, that may not be getting me to the end I want.
Okay, cool. Well, I like those. I'm glad you're thinking about good ideas. Any other thoughts? Any ideas? What else do you guys write about? I'm curious. No one dares.
I don't blog.
Nothing? No social media persona?
Well, Twitter and whatnot.
Okay. Cool.
I repost a bunch of stuff on Tumblr. I noticed that. I don't think that counts as blogging. But I'm involved in a ton of fan networks.
Nice. Well, either way, I would encourage you guys to use this word next time you're thinking about making a change or switching something up. People hate change. I hate it really bad. If I get a promotion at work, I hate my new job for months until I adjust and then I love it, right? I hate change, but I do love to experiment. And there's kind of a difference, right? There's a little bit of a temporariness to experiment. You can try something. Just try something new. Mix something up. As you feel something has gotten stale, be brave and try something new and just experiment. So the next thing that Dr. Who does really well to stay fresh is it is an incredibly positive show. One of my favorite quotes from the show, I am and always will be the optimist. So Doctor Who is a very tragic show. It likes to have sad endings quite a bit. The Doctor runs into a lot of dark scenarios, dark worlds. It's kind of a Monster of the Week show, so he's always running into monsters and things that are scary. But the one thing that I think that really resonates with people when they watch this show is that despite all of that, Doctor Who is an optimist every episode, right? He's constantly believing in people. He's constantly believing that everything's going to work out. Here's another one of my favorite lines. This is one when I sent out that survey and asked people, was there a moment in Doctor Who that meant something to you or that stood out to you? And this is one of the most responded ones. Was when the Ninth Doctor shouts, "Everybody lives, Rose, just this once. Everybody lives." Incredibly powerful moment. So last week, actually, justunfollow.com did a big survey to find out the #1 reason why people unfollow somebody on Twitter. Does anybody dare to make a guess?
Negative comments.
Negative comments? Good.
Too many posts in a short time.
That was #2. Tweeting too much was #2.
Self-centeredness.
Tweeting too little was #3.
Liking the wrong doctor.
The wrong Doctor Who fan. Good. Yeah, you're right. It was complaining. Complaining was by far the #1 reason that people will unfollow you from Twitter. I just unfollowed somebody this morning because all they do is complain. So I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So positivity is kind of a scarce resource, I feel like, in a lot of media these days, and especially in online. People have this new outlet to express themselves, and one of the major things that motivates us to express ourselves is frustration, anger, or something that kind of needs that outlet to sort of get out. And positivity and optimism are becoming kind of more and more unique resources or unique aspects online. And so I'd encourage you to maybe follow Dr. Who's lead and see if we can be a little more positive. Negativity is it's just kind of a draining thing. I'm not, this is a personal preference, but I do like a lot of stand-up comedy, but I cannot get into rant style stand-up comedy and insult comics. I can't get into it. Like after like 5 minutes, I just kind of have to walk out or turn it off because I just feel completely drained. But the good ones are very positive. They love making fun of the ridiculousness of life, which I do too. But it's not as draining of an experience. I just feel like they're taking more than they're giving, whereas if you're positive, it keeps things very fresh. It's just kind of refreshing to find something positive. Okay. So this is a big one. If you want to stay fresh, you want people coming back after 50 years of being online, you have to give them a reason to come back. This is one of my favorite reasons. This is a trope called the terrible secret of space. Has anybody ever heard of the terrible secret of space? Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's the terrible secret of space?
It's been so long, it was like the pusher robots and shovel robots.
It's this completely bizarre YouTube video. It wasn't even a YouTube video back. It was like
no, it was a Flash
YouTube.
video.
Yeah, it was before YouTube. There's this video. It's called The Terrible Secret of Space. It's weird, but it went viral like back in the day, back before YouTube. And so I just kind of call this trope The Terrible Secret of Space. So Doctor Who has a great terrible secret of space. Basically, when I say terrible secret of space, it just means like something that you want to know, right? It's something that you want to know, but you're sure you might think that you might not even be able to find out. So the Doctor Who's terrible secret of space is Doctor Who, right? And so Doctor Who will tease a little bit every once in a while, like with River's song. He may or may not have told some people what his name is. Isn't there an episode where it shows his name in Gallifreyan? Maybe not. But these people apparently don't want to know the Doctor's name. But it kind of gives you this anticipation, this interest in the show, in coming back because, man, there's a chance that they could reveal it. I doubt it. But it's a great hook. So there's another show out there. I may be getting a little obscure. There's an anime show called Attack on Titan going on right now. All right, another fan. So Attack on Titan hooks you in the first episode for a lot of reasons, but the number one to me was it has a perfect example of a terrible secret of space. And Attack on Titan's terrible secret of space is the main character's father says, Aaron, I'm going to the inner city. I'll be gone for a few days. And when I come back, and he pulls a key out, he has a key around his neck and says, when I come back, I'm going to show you what I've been keeping in the basement. And then he leaves, right? And so, like every few episodes, they remind you there's something in the basement, and nobody has any idea what it is. It could totally be a MacGuffin. I have no idea. But like they just sort of keep alluding and keep getting closer to this basement scenario, and it just drives people crazy. Like it's all people talk about online is what's in the basement. There's all these theories, but it has this anticipation, right? The show is crazy. It's very fast-paced. Every episode ends with a cliffhanger and gives you a reason to watch the next one. I stayed up way too late the first night I discovered it and had horrible nightmares all night. It's a pretty horrifying show. So again, I'm pretty lucky because I have what's going on next week. What's going on next week? What's going on next week? I have a pretty easy in. I'm pretty lucky. But maybe just think about how you can. What could be your terrible secret of space? Not necessarily as epic as what's in the basement or the name of the doctor, but if you want people coming back, you have to create anticipation. If you want people to subscribe to your blog, they have to have a reason to subscribe because they have to have a reason to come back. It's great to have great content, and people can be inspired by that and think, there could be a large percentage that say, hey, Jonathan writes really good stuff. I know that he's a good blogger. I want to see more of his stuff. And you're going to get some subscribers that way. But if you take a thought or something that you wanted to share, Ruth, I'll pick on you. Maybe you have something legal that you want to talk about. Maybe like split it into a series instead of cramming it into one blog post, something maybe a little more readable. Turn it into a series, and at the end of that first post, tell them what they'll get if they tune in next week, just like in these shows that we're talking about. This has been one of the best advice I've ever gotten. I read a blog post about this. I don't even remember which blog I read this on, where I would totally give them credit because I read this when I first got into blogging and it stuck with me ever since. If you want people to subscribe, you have to create anticipation. Tell them, and you have to tell them what they'll get if they tune in next week. So at the beginning of this presentation, I threw out a terrible secret of space. And I said, if you stick around, then I will share some of these representations that the companions have. You guys ready for one?
Yeah.
Okay. First, I'll let anybody who wants to guess. Who do you think Martha Jones could represent in literature or fairy tale? It's pretty funny. So if you think about it, Martha Jones, the first time you meet her, where is she? She's in the hospital. And this huge storm comes, envelops the hospital, and rips the hospital completely off the planet and takes it to the moon, right? That's how we first meet Martha Jones. And then when she leaves, when she's done being the companion, she leaves by choice because she returns home to her family after seeing the wizard for who he is, right? She kind of realizes nothing's going to happen with this guy. He's just not that into her, and she moves on. So, okay, next thing. Doctor Who's pretty ridiculous. I kind of realized this. I might make some enemies here. I skipped the Ninth Doctor when I started watching this show. I sort of threw out there to my friends, like, where should I start? I want to get into Doctor Who, where should I start? And most of the consensus was to start with the 10th Doctor. So I did, and I announced that on Facebook, and it started a war, like in the comments section, of the people that got really, really mad that I started with number 10 instead of starting with number 9. So I was watching the 10th Doctor. I was watching David Tennant, so he's my favorite one because you never forget your first Doctor. And there was an episode called "The Girl in the Fireplace," which is still one of my favorite episodes of all time. Seeing some nodding heads, and it's a tragic episode. Like, it kind of breaks your heart at the end. And I remember, like, I was at the gym and I was watching it on my phone, and I went over to Darby, my wife Darby, and I was like, Darby, I don't understand how this show can be completely ridiculous, but also so meaningful. And we'll talk about meaningful later, but it's a ridiculous show. Like, my favorite example of this is there's an episode where aliens suck fat out of people, and then the fat comes alive as, like, cute little aliens that people love, and then they get sucked up into a spaceship, like nursery. It's completely ridiculous. I love it, personally. The Doctor himself says that the universe is big, it's vast, and complicated, and ridiculous. So, when I say ridiculous, I really mean being interesting. Being interesting is a huge part of keeping your fan base alive. And by that, I looked up the word interesting because I use it a lot, but it's nice to kind of understand what you're saying. So we're talking about being interesting, we're talking about arousing curiosity and then keeping their attention. So when I pitched, like, the show or to you guys in one sentence, or had people pitch it to me, I should say, there was a whole bunch of answers, but I kind of wanted to show how powerful being ridiculous can be. If you look at this, Batman and Willy Wonka have a love child who travels through space and time in a phone box, versus, and I apologize if somebody wrote this, an alien hundreds of years old travels through time and space with a human companion and hijinks ensue. Both completely valid descriptions of the show, but which one sounds like more fun? Which one, like, grabs your attention? It's the one that's a little more ridiculous. So there's lots of ways to be ridiculous or be interesting and capture attention. I don't want to rehash everything I talked about last year, but last year I talked about layers. And if you want to be unique, to find 3 or 4 things that you're passionate about, see if you can mash them together and kind of layer them together. And it only takes about 2 or 3 things to find something unique. I talk to a lot of other bloggers or people, and I'm always like, you know what I would love? I would love for an economist to write a blog about not just video games, but, like, economies within video games. Like, I would love to hear see an economist blog, and maybe it's out there and I haven't found it, about, like, the economics behind the coins in Mario, and, like, getting 100 coins equals a life, and, like, what that all means, and, you know, you're going to expand. But just take 2 things that don't belong together, that are completely ridiculous, and mash them together, become 1,000 times more interesting. Another way to be unique is to avoid doing what other people are doing. One of my favorite lines from The Simpsons is when Bart Simpson joins the Scouts on accident. I think he's on a sugar high and he doesn't realize what he's doing. And he joins the Boy Scouts, and they hand him this book about knife safety that says, "Don't do what Donnie Don't does." And so there's some great imagery here. I love that one. But if everybody else in your niche is just posting stuff they found on Reddit, just make a decision. I'm not going to be the guy that just reposts stuff that they found on Reddit. I'm going to do something else. If everybody in your niche is kind of doing the same thing, try to avoid it and create something else. If other episodes of your TV show have dialogue, make an episode where you have no dialogue in it and experiment and see what happens. Anybody remotely interesting is mad in some way. I think it was Scarpy that said that one. Could be wrong. So I've got that misappropriated to the 10th Doctor. So here's my favorite example of a ridiculous thing that is doing really well. Can anybody tell me what the #1 podcast in the world is right now by far?
Joe Rogan.
It's called Welcome to Night Vale. Has nobody heard of Welcome to Night Vale?
That podcast is awesome.
That podcast is awesome.
Yes.
I cannot believe how awesome this podcast is. And it is ridiculous. Welcome to Night Vale. Basically the premise is, think of a little town in the desert where everything Twilight Zone-y that could possibly happen in the Twilight Zone is real and pretty generally accepted by the populace. And Welcome to Night Vale is the community radio guy jabbering away in the middle of the night about community calendars, local news, what the sheriff's secret police is up to, what the colors of helicopters mean that are hovering over your home at night. It is fantastic. I highly, highly, highly recommend that everybody subscribes to Welcome to Night Vale. So not this last episode that just came out that I haven't heard yet, but the episode before it is called A Beautiful Dream. And I don't want to spoil too much, but after the episodes are only like 20 minutes long. And every episode has what's called the weather. And the radio guy, Cecil, will say, and now the weather. And then it cuts to a song, and it's like a new band every day. And if you cut that out, episodes are usually less than 20 minutes, since I kind of skip through those sometimes. But, so I don't want to spoil this episode, but it's about a computer that takes over the school on behalf of a little girl who is actually a grown man's severed hand. And you see where I'm going. It's a completely ridiculous show. And I was like on the edge of my seat this whole thing. This episode is the perfect example. So just do yourself a favor. I'm just giving you homework. Just go home and listen to A Beautiful Dream on Welcome to Night Vale. And find something that is fresh, that is ridiculous, and completely meaningful. Because the computer takes over most of the episode because it's taking over. So it takes over most of the episode. And it's like an old speak and spell voice, and it starts describing this beautiful world that it's making for this little girl who's picked on because she's actually a severed grown man's hand. And the writing in it is amazing. But anyway, #1 comic out there online. The Oatmeal. Would you say that the Oatmeal is ridiculous, Sam?
No, he's awesome.
I think the episode of this book is why you should punch a dolphin in the face, or how to punch a dolphin in the face.
Which I own 2 copies of.
Which she has 2 copies of. It's completely ridiculous. It grabs your attention. This guy knows how to write headlines. He knows how to grab attention by taking things that don't belong together and mashing it together. In fact, I'm going to pull up the next slide. If you never want to run out of ideas, use lists. And have just sit down, give yourself an hour, and write a list of lists. So write down 10 lists of things that you care about, things that you're interested in, things that you don't like, things that happened to you that day, whatever it is. And then write down 10 things on each of those lists, and just lay them all out in front of you, and just absorb, and just like have osmosis, and just look at those lists and see, what could I connect that nobody else would have thought of before? What suddenly makes sense when I look at them next to each other? What makes absolutely no sense, but I could come up with something? If you just do this every once in a while, you'll never run out of really good ideas to come with. And so the reason I mentioned the Oatmeal is because one of his comics that he put out was about working from home. It was about how sort of the trials and tribulations of being an online comic writer. And it's pretty funny, but he actually opens up a little bit. Sorry, people are parched. And it's kind of a long form comic, but he's got a section in there that describes how he comes up with ideas. And he gets into it by saying that a lot of people give me suggestions about what to do a comic about. He's like, I never actually write about what I get suggestions on, but I will write them down and then I'll just kind of start thinking about it. I'll think about other things. And I believe he uses the example of, people tell him all the time, oh, you should write about hipsters. Hipsters are so stupid, it'd be really easy to make fun of them. And so he shows like how he comes to what he wants to write about. He starts out, hipsters, what are hipsters? And he just starts kind of talking about hipsters, and then he's like, hipsters are indifferent, or at least they pretend to be. And then he writes, goats are indifferent. And then the bottom of it, like, just popped into his head, right? Goats don't care about stuff. And then on the bottom, he kind of, oh, wait, goats have beards, hipsters have beards. And so he came up with why hipsters are or why goats are the hipsters of the Northwest, or something like that. And so this was just an example. He never actually wrote this comic, but in the comments, it's like everybody wants it. Everybody wants him to write why goats are the hipsters of the Northwest. He does a really good job. Anyway, this always happens. I go too slow. The last one is to just have fun. I don't care what topic you guys are writing about, but if you're passionate about it, have fun with it. It's very refreshing. It's very positive. Being ridiculous is just fun. Being ridiculous is just more fun. I already talked about that story. This is a great example of Doctor Who just being fun and ridiculous and not taking itself seriously. Oh, how to explain the mechanics of infinite temporal flux? Oh, I know. Back to the Future. It's like Back to the Future. This is one of the very few times that they explain timelines in the show, and they just move on. It's pretty good. Okay, last point. Keeping it meaningful. Double rainbow, what does it mean? So last year I had a joke where I said, I read recently that every presentation should have a tweetable quote, right? So here's my tweetable quote this time. Meaningful blogging is actually more powerful than powerful blogging. Meaningful writing is more powerful than powerful writing. Meaningful social media is more powerful than powerful social media. And what I mean by that is, I'll ask you guys, what do you guys think the difference is between meaningful and powerful? If some guy stood in front of the classroom and asked you that question, what would you say?
Something meaningful stays with you,
Okay?
over time.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. Any other thoughts?
Meaningful touches the heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. From the heart. Okay, good. Versus powerful. I did some research on this and kind of came to the understanding that, let me just lead into this. Where does meaning come from? And more specifically, you as a blogger, social media podcaster, where does meaning from what you're producing come from? It comes from your audience's attachments to what you have said. Exactly. You can't apply meaning unless you're very open and blank to that. Meaning comes from the meaning of art comes from those interpreting it most of the time. Meaning comes from your audience. So if you are focusing on writing a powerful blog post, that's fine. But if you think about what it would mean to somebody, if you think about what does it mean, then you can have a longer lasting, kind of brings people back and stay as alive as Doctor Who. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, so don't laugh when I give you this answer, but I asked myself, what do I mean? What does meaning mean? What does it mean, right? It's kind of a joke. And this is the conclusion I came to. Meaningful means anything that you can ask the question, what does it mean, and you have a good answer. So for me, if I think, I'll tell you when I realized that I did something meaningful. It was when somebody emailed me and said, really short, hey Jonathan, I love your blog. Thanks for putting this up every week. I read it every week so that I can plan my weekend, keep it up. Just something super short like that. And I remember having a conversation with my wife Darby that night saying, for some reason it just like dawned on me that this stupid blog of mine is like a part of people's lives. Like people are planning their weekends based off of the stuff that I'm finding and writing about and putting online. And ever since then, I've always sort of like tried to ask, like, okay, this is part of somebody's life in a very small, admittedly small way, but I still want to do a good job so that people that want to get out can get out. And it kind of dawned on me that I'm not just doing this just for fun. I'm doing it because people who may just be sitting at home bored and alone are getting out and not being bored and alone. Maybe they're meeting other people. Maybe they're getting connected with something that they love. Maybe they're finding something that they didn't know that they love. And I know that's crazy cheesy for a blog about what's going on in the valley that's nerdy, but that's how I try to be. That's how I try to be meaningful. So I thought of two ways that you can apply meaningfulness into your writing. And one is to encourage. So using that example, encouraging people to get out, or encouraging them and letting them know that they're valid. We'll skip my example, actually. I think I'm running out of time. But going back to that question that I put out in my survey to fans of Doctor Who, what was a quote, a scene, or an episode that was meaningful to you in some way? This was one of the first ones. This is one of the top ones that came through. It's from a Christmas episode where the Doctor says, I think the lead into this line is, he asks somebody who that woman is, and the man says, nobody important. And he says, very seriously, in 900 years, in time and space, I've never met anybody who wasn't important. So for maybe a throwaway line, a really good line, a really well put together line, but it obviously stuck with a lot of people that replied to the survey that I put out, and it meant something to them. Another thing you can do is, I was going to put call to action, but I like call to adventure better. It just sounds cool. Is encourage people to take action to do something. So if your blog is about legal stuff, maybe they need to change the way that they're doing, the way that they're posting things, or where they're getting their pictures from, or something, right? We'll hear all about that next. And then, or if it's about Phoenix Comic-Con, it's encouraging people to dress up or come or get a ticket or whatever it is. If you can encourage them to improve their life in some way or give them something that can give them a call to adventure, that's another way to create meaning. This was the other biggest response I got when I asked what was a meaningful quote from Doctor Who to you. Was this one, and I included the story that went along with it. So the Doctor says, the way I see it, every life is a pile of good things and a pile of bad things. The good things don't always soften the bad things, but vice versa. The bad things don't necessarily spoil the good things or make them unimportant. And whoever wrote this to me said, I love the quote instantly, but several weeks later my son did a very good deed, and he told me he just wanted to add to his pile of good things. So this episode had meaning to this mother or father, doesn't have a gender, mother or father, as a son, because the kid watched the show, they heard the quote, that made sense to them, and it encouraged them to do something good, right? Maybe it softened bullying or something like that. The other, this episode, I'll cheat and go back to just encouraging people, has a fantastic ending. This is an episode where the Doctor and Amy, his companion, go back and visit Vincent van Gogh. And at the time in Vincent van Gogh's life, he is struggling like he always did. We all know that Vincent van Gogh had problems. And he's kind of like a joke at the time, because he wasn't famous at the time. And so he's really depressed. I think it's a 2-part episode, he's really depressed. At the very end, this is a total spoiler, but the Doctor does him a favor. He persuades him to come into the TARDIS, and they go to modern-day London to a museum where they're exhibiting Vincent van Gogh's work. And he kind of pulls Vincent van Gogh out of the TARDIS and walks up to, I don't know if he's the curator or the museum director or somebody who knows about Vincent van Gogh, and asks this person to describe Vincent van Gogh's work to him. And so the man, not knowing that Vincent van Gogh is in the room right next to him, starts to describe how much he loves Vincent van Gogh's work, about the colors and what he could see that others couldn't see, and how it's touched him personally and touched millions of lives, and the people come from all over the world to see his work. And you see Vincent van Gogh with like tears streaming down his face that he just felt for a moment completely validated. If you can do that in your blog, if you can encourage somebody and let them know that they are important, that they do matter, that whatever good they're doing matters, you can be meaningful. So how do we get there? You guys ever heard of the Golden Circle?
Yep.
Okay. Pretty popular in marketing and writing and things like that. So what I would encourage you to do, I have always struggled with this word. It's so hard. It's such a big little word that it's so hard to answer. And I've done much better if I ask, what does it mean? What does it mean if I write this post? What does it mean if I just keep blogging? If it's Wednesday night and I'm exhausted and I need to put up this post for Thursday morning, why am I doing this, right? What would it mean? Well, if I ask that question, what would it mean? It could mean that somebody gets out and connects with something that they wouldn't normally do. And I don't have time to get into it, but I want to give you some more homework. Does anybody happen to have heard of the snowflake method? Maybe not. This is a novel writing method where it's kind of an interesting exercise where you take what you want to write about. So the idea of your story or your blog or your novel, and you put it into one sentence. And that's like the first rule is you have to stick it into one sentence, what you want to write about. And then you kind of like get some sleep, and then you come back the next day, and you take that sentence and you expand it into two, and then you expand it the next day into a paragraph. And then the idea is that this snowflake kind of starts forming, and the connections start being made, and this idea kind of gets fleshed out. So I just kind of wanted to offer it as a, again, you can't get too into it, but there's like some great resources online about the snowflake method of turning an idea into something that you can actually produce ideas around. Well, you guys have been fantastic, and I made a promise earlier, and I'm going to deliver. All right, Donna Noble. I know you guys haven't been thinking about it, but does anybody want to make a guess who Donna Noble might represent? All right. Tumbles unexpectedly into a new world, refuses to hold her tongue. Was it all a dream? This one's actually kind of creepy. So a new pawn is Wendy from Peter Pan. She flew away with her imaginary childhood friend who comes back later for her daughter. All right, I'm going to make you guys guess just on the picture. And her job before she becomes a companion. Mary Poppins, the fun, mysterious nanny. Thanks a lot, guys. That's all I got.
Good job, sweetie.
Thanks. Nice to meet you. Thanks. How's it going? It's called Lightning on Lightning on Lightning. Maybe. Anyway, it's a pretty ridiculous title. You might be able to insert that. Thanks. I knew that would happen. I had 50 minutes, so I made 54 slides. I was like, if nothing else, I can burn through it. There's no way.